Hello, YouTube. Hello, Brian.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Let's just kick this thing off, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, and welcome to Python Bytes, where we deliver Python news and headlines directly to your earbuds. This is 394, recorded July 30th, 2024. I am Michael Kennedy.
And I'm Brian Ocken.
And this episode is brought to you by Scout APM. Thank you, Scout APM, for sponsoring the show. We will tell you more about them later. If you want to connect with us on the socials, the best, but not the only place, is over on Mastodon, where all the links, me, Brian, and the show all have our accounts listed at the top of the page of the show notes. You'll see in your podcast player or the website. Also, if you're not joining us live and you would like to, we record Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Check that out, pythonbytes.fm/live. You'll see all the older versions under the live section on our YouTube channel there. And finally, you probably do want to also get this a summary of this episode in your email. I'm sure you do. A handcrafted, artisanal Brian Ocken special email. So just visit pythonbytes.fm, click on newsletter, enter your information. We won't give it away, share with other people, resell it, retarget you, do evil things. We just will communicate with you about stuff we're up to, mostly the show. Brian, I learned Python this weekend. I learned Python. It was a good weekend. Is that the same? Is that what you're telling me for your first item here? Python's easy?
Okay. Like, where are you going with this, Michael? I think you've known it for a while.
No, I bundled the joke a little bit, but yes.
That's all right.
Python is easy, I hear.
Yeah, Python is easy now. Apparently. No, I love Python. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about was beyond hypermodern or postmodern. I'm not sure what the tagline is really. So this is an article by Chris Ardern. Chris, sorry about I probably mangled your last name, but I really like the article, Chris. So what is this? So it's the title is Beyond Hypermodern Python is Easy Now, and this is a reference to hypermodern Python that was he says it came out like as a series that came out 4 years ago or something. Interesting. But it's what was who was the hypermodern person again? I can't remember. I should have looked this up anyway. Claudio I'm not going to try. Claudio's book, Hypermodern Python Tooling, is now as a book, which is cool. Good job. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about beyond hypermodern, or from the URL postmodern. So what is this? Basically, it's talking about all the tooling, and it's all in Rye now. So this is what Chris's idea is you could do so much in Rye. And actually, I knew Rye did a lot, and but Rye is actually does more than I thought you could. So Rye is a tool that's like kind of does a lot of stuff around Python. So there's setup. It goes through setup, linting, typing, testing, documentation, CI/CD, and then there's a bonus section on monorepo. But I really liked just walking through, like if you wanted to try out Rye, all the different like the workflow, going through the entire workflow of building a Python project. Like the setup part is setting up an initial directory, including setting up your pyproject.toml and setting up some different directories, which is great. Just sets up the structure for you. There's a lot of files here that like to tell you the truth, I don't use lock files a lot. Partly because I'm often developing Python modules or packages, which I don't really lock stuff. Locking is more regularly around applications. So, do you have lock files for some of your application stuff, Michael?
All of them.
All of them.
I use the pip compile workflow.
Okay.
So I've got like one thing that specifies the top level requirements, and then another one that is the lock file using UV pip compile.
Okay. One of the things that I didn't think about was like requirements for the requirements -dev lock. So instead of requirements.txt, these are the dependencies are in your pyproject.toml, but there are requirements lock files. But a dev lock file that I might actually have even for a package, like
Yeah.
to keep make sure all the developers are using the same thing. So that's kind of interesting.
It makes a lot of sense. I was just had when did I publish it? This was that this week's episode? I can't remember. Very, very, very recently. David Lord from Flask on Talk Python.
Yeah.
And one of the things they're working on is creating a more repeatable environment for contributors and developers to Flask. So, like you, Flask, you don't want to just pin the versions of everything because that wrecks everybody else's options to work with different versions. But you do want to make sure that people who do PRs have the same setup as people who are reviewing the PRs, right? So we
Yeah.
talked a lot about having a pinned requirements for developers of the project, but not the project itself.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. So so that's set up. There's you can do linting with it. The testing section talks about pytest, yay. But the one of the things that I thought was kind of neat was this and I think I knew this, but anyway, this idea of scripts. So within your PyProject Tomo, you can set up Rye scripts. So they're basically extra commands that do things like, so you could say like uh, Rye run test, and so the run command runs your script. So you can say run, and a test is a thing that you've said that just like defaults to Rye test, but things like Rye run check might be running Pyrite, or for linting, or for type checking, or linting is Rye lint fix, yeah, with a fix or something. So all these different, if you've especially if you've got other people on the team, having some way to do all of this is good. And then a kind of a neat thing that's pretty is nice is being able to chain uh, scripts. So if you've got like running your form auto formatting and linting and their type checking and also running your tests, but then if you want to do all of them, there's a way to just chain them up within the PyProject Atomos, which is kind of cool. So
Yeah, that's very cool.
this kind of takes the place of where I would use either where I used to use make files. Now I use talks commands for, but so a lot of this around. Uh, if you don't need it, I'm guessing this doesn't create a new virtual environment, but I haven't played with it yet. But that's where talks would do that. Um, so there's a discussion around documentation. It isn't really a Rye thing, but just talking about documenting things well. But I really kind of like this article about like if you want to try out, mostly because I do want to try out Rye, and this kind of walks through all the different things it does within your workflow and where you might want to pull it in. And I do appreciate that Rye has some configuration. So for apparently the default uh, packaging tool is Hatch, but but this person Chris wanted to use PDM, so you can set that. But I'd probably leave it as Hatch because I like Hatch, but might do something different. But you can even set a dependency operator, so whether you want it to be like approximately equal to or greater than equal or whatever. Kind of neat. The the bonus is really kind of fun. I actually just ran into a project where I have to help support, which is a large repository with multiple Python projects in it, and so I'm looking forward to reading through how possibly this documentation around dealing with mono repos in Python. This is on my to read next list. So
That's cool. That's next level stuff right there.
yeah.
Well, very, very cool. Brian, am happy to report, I think, that the Gill has been vanquished. We
What?
are now in the epoch of free-threaded Python. So how might you test this out and see if it's actually worth it and so on.
Okay.
So Simon Willison, one of his Today I Learns, is trying out free-threaded Python on Mac OS. It could be others as well. But you can just go to this is interesting. I didn't realize that you would be able to get free-threaded Python this way from the PEP. It's like you've got to get a special build of it, and it's just like its own thing, right?
Yeah.
But if you get the Mac OS installer, I don't know about the others, but presumably the Windows one has something similar or will. I don't know. You go to install this, and you can set up the options, custom install, and you can just check off a checkbox to install a separate binary for free-threaded Python 3.13 instead of guild Python.
Wow,
Gilded.
and that's just from the python.org download.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, just to get that, it downloads beta 3 of it, and there it is. So you just hit customize your install, and boom. So that alone is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then once you do that, you get not just a Python 3.13, but a Python 3.13t, which interesting. Not FT. I mean, the other one should have a T on it. Come on, if it's going to be threaded, I don't know. Anyway, T, whatever. You get one that is like, that's the one you can run in the command line for free threaded Python. And Simon points out, like, didn't really put this in the path because it's beta. I don't want to mess stuff up. But nonetheless, there it is. So let's test it out. Comes up with a simple little program that just does some CPU bound thing. This is the important thing. We've, for a long time since Python 3.4, had really good options to parallelize IO bound or waiting types of things. I'm talking to a network. I'm talking to a database. I'm talking to whatever with async IO, right? But
Yeah.
the CPU bound stuff, the GIL would stop it and go, yeah, no, I don't care how many cores you got. You got one, right?
Yeah.
And so this is just summing up a bunch of numbers, the squares of the numbers, just like doing some computational busy work, right? So it says, okay, well, let's set up a little app that'll take some parameters so we can feed it different information and see what we'll get, and then run it on a thread pool executor with as many threads that are specified. So starts out, just to skip ahead. So look, I ran it once. I get 1 core. It says 99% CPU usage on Mac OS. That it reports this as 100% basis as being 1 core fully busy. So if you've got 8 cores, this could go up to 800%. It's kind of weird. Anyway, 99% CPU if you run the regular one, but if you run the free threaded one, he was getting some number that was a little low. There's a bug. It's not super relevant about him fixing the bug or not. I don't really think that matters. But what the takeaway is, if you run it with 4 threads, that whole workload ran in 1.3 seconds. You run it with 12 threads, it went down to 1 second. I don't know how many cores he has. I don't believe it said. But with the GIL, that's 4 seconds versus 1 second or 1.3 seconds for the basically 4 times as fast. Presumably this is a 4-core system. I'm not sure. Anyway, pretty cool, right?
That is pretty cool.
So yes, that's faster. 4 times faster is 400%. That's no joke. That'll make a difference for some people. But I think more relevant is just like, hey, look, apparently the installers have it. Right? That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I was chuckling because it said testing it out. It says, I asked Claude 3.5 Sonnet to write me a quick test script, but the script it come up with is something I know that he can write on his own.
Yeah, exactly.
But
exactly.
That's
yeah,
funny.
it didn't come up with something all that interesting, and it introduced a bug. He should have just written it himself. Oh well.
But this is neat. Actually, I saw the announcement that there were some builds of the free threaded one, but I didn't know you could just do it, like click it from the installer. That's cool.
Yeah, that's the big news I took away as well. Very cool.
Neat.
Very neat. And you know what you don't have to build yourself is an APM platform.
Right.
You could let Scout do that for you. Let me tell you real quick about Scout APM. They're big supporters of Python Bytes, so we appreciate that very much. So if you are tired of spending hours trying to find the root cause of issues impacting your performance, then you owe it to yourself to check out Scout APM. They're a leading Python application performance monitoring tool, APM, that helps you identify and solve performance abnormalities faster and easier. Scout APM ties bottlenecks such as memory leaks, slow database queries, background jobs, and the dreaded N+1 queries that you can end up if you do lazy loading in your ORM. Then you say, oh no, why is it so slow? Why are you doing 200 database queries for what should be 1? So you can find out things like that. And it links it back directly to source code, so you can spend less time in the debugger and tailing logs and just finding the problems and moving on. And you'll love it because it's built for developers by developers. It makes it easy to get set up. Seriously, you can do it in less than 4 minutes. So that's awesome. And the best part is the pricing is straightforward. You only pay for the data that you use with no hidden overage fees or per seat pricing. And I just learned this, Brian. They provide the pro version for free to all open source projects. So if you're an open source maintainer and you want to have Scout APM for that project, just shoot them a message or something on their pricing page about that. So you can start your free trial and get instant insights today. Visit pythonbytes.fm/scout. The link is in your podcast player show notes as well. And please use that link. Don't just search for them, because otherwise they don't think you came from us, and then they'd stop supporting the show. So please use our link, pythonbytes.fm/scout. Check them out. It really supports the show. What's next, Brian?
Next, what's next? I want to iterate to the next topic. I want to talk about iter tools. So I really this comes from Rodrigo from mathspp.com, and he writes a lot of great articles. But I know we've covered iter tools before, and people have heard of iter tools, and it's built into Python. But there's so many goodies in there that I like to have people tell me what their favorites are and reshaping. So this is this is an article that groups all of the I think there's more than 20 in there, but anyway, 20 tools that every Python developer should be aware of from iter tools, and it's broken into 5 categories. There's reshaping iterators, filtering iterators, combinatorial, infinite, and iterators that complement other tools. And I just did a quick list of this, and I really think there's a few of these in here that I need to use more. So I'm glad I ran across this article. One of them, so right off the bat, it says the 3 most useful iterators are product. And what product does is it simplifies, like, let's say you've got a nested loop of like width and height, for instance. For X in range of width and for Y in range of height, you do something with X and Y. Well, you can use iter tools product and have it just be one does a product of 2 ranges or product of 2 iterators, and gives you the 2 like all of the combinations in order. So that's a really cool thing that I always forget about, that I probably should write that more, especially if you've got more than 2. When you get like 3, it gets ridiculous. And so using iter tools to simplify that, it's a really great idea. And because, with Python, every time you indent into a for loop, you're going to indent your code. It helps you keep the horizontal width of your code a little bit more reasonable.
Flat,
Okay.
threaded, nested, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Chain, I always remember about. So chain is a way to combine 2 lists and iterate through all of them instead of adding the lists. Adding is it creates a new one. You might not need that, whereas chain will iterate through both of them. And I have to remind people, if you're not aware, all these really cool things within the iter tools, they're a way to manipulate iterators such that you're not copying things. You're not making a new list of something. You're just iterating through existing iterators without doing the copy. I'm pretty sure that's true.
Yeah.
The one that the third one on is everybody should know about, that I thought was great, was pairwise, and I actually apparently never knew about this. And this is a way to, like, let's say you've got the example is a bunch of names, and you want to be able to make sure that everybody says hi to the person on their right. You can go through and this might be a silly example, but if you want to go through an entire sequence and make sure each pair you're just walking it down, like the first, like number 1 and number 2, and then 2 and 3, and then 3 and 4. This is an easy way to do that. And actually, there's an old way of using zip with you can combine 2 lists and do slices, but that's a little confusing. Whereas pairwise just gives it to you right away. It returns 2 pointers to objects. So that's really cool. A couple more things I wanted to bring up that I thought were great in here was zip longest, which I do remember because I use it frequently. But if you're zipping 2 things together, which means you're going to go through and go through two sequences using zip, by default, zip picks the shortest, and and it just chops it off. I think. Actually, I don't remember what it does at the end. But zip longest will have a fill value, so you give it a fill value, and it goes through everything, and you'll have something empty. So you make sure you go through everything. And then the last thing is T, which is kind of neat. It allows you to do normally iterators are exhausted once you go through it, so you have to like regenerate an iterator. But T allows you to iterate through something a couple times. It allows you to iterate without exhausting the iterator, which interesting. So nice. And then at the end, a discussion of which I think is cool that he did this. So a discussion that there is he wrote a book on iter tools. So there's a little book of iter tools. He's not paying for this ad. I just think it's neat that somebody wrote a book about iter tools. That's nice, neat.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's pretty neat.
So
there's a lot of powerful stuff there.
Yeah,
Solve a lot of simple, hard problems in simple ways.
I really appreciate that he picked out those first three though. Of like, even if you're not really wanting to go through all of this, like take a look at these three. You probably need them, and you just don't realize it. So, yeah. So, what do you got for us next, Michael?
You would love to know if your website was down, not up, or your Docker container, or your other service, and you would like to be notified in interesting ways. And there are services you can pay for this, or free services that have weird limitations, or I don't know, just funky stuff, right? Some of those, in order to answer really good questions, you'd have to give them pretty serious internal access to your code or to your infrastructure potentially. So I present to you the Uptime Karma, which I'm just trying hard to resist Uptime Karma. But no, Uptime Karma, a fancy self-hosted monitoring tool. So this thing is pretty cool. It comes with a Docker variant, so you can just Docker compose it into life. And I'm thinking about setting this up for Python Bytes and TalkPython and other things because I've already got that Docker cluster and all the infrastructure to run it. So adopting it should be really easy. It just takes one container to run, and I believe it stores its data into a SQLite database in there. So file copy is kind of a backup. It's kind of the backup option, right? So anyway, check this out. Doesn't this look neat, Brian? You tell it different things you want to do. Like, I want to check that the port is open. I want to check that this example is, some example.com website is up. You can see that MySQL is running. You can ping the server to see that the server is up. All sorts of things you can put as tests in here, and you can even have an anti-test. Like, for example, if you're ever able to directly connect to the database, that should be flagged as an error, that like a down moment, not an up moment, because something's gone wrong with the infrastructure and you need to go fix it, but in a reverse sort of way. So what does it say? First of all, 53,000 GitHub stars. So really, really quite popular. It has a little test server you can set up, point at your website for 10 minutes and play with it. That's a really nice feature. But it says uptime monitoring for HTTPS, TCP, HTTP keywords, JSON query, ping, a DNS record. You can make sure your DNS records don't go insane, and like your MX DKIM or I don't know, whatever. Game servers, and even check that your certain Docker containers are still running. So it's got a nice UI, and it has notifications for Telegram, Discord, Slack, pushover, email, and 90 other notifications. Can have as fine-grained as every 20 seconds checking. It comes with status pages. So if we had a Python Bytes monitor set up with this, I could set up status.pythonbytes.fm that people could go and see if the RSS feed is live. Is the Docker container running? Is X, Y, and Z, right? So it has that for you. And it'll also, one thing I really like, because I use Let's Encrypt, but the auto renewal is a little bit janky. Long story, I don't want to go into it, but it's a little bit janky. And so it works, but it requires a little fiddling. So having it will actually check SSL certificates to see if they'll expire. So it'll say like, your certificate is good for 29 more days. You
Oh,
want to get on
that's
that
cool.
before it goes like, something terrible. Whew. So all of that. Isn't that sweet?
It is cool.
Yeah, there's a bunch of sponsors, and it's got this nice UI. You can bump over to the status page. It'll prepare you a little demo app, and it runs for a certain amount of time.
So
Let's
how
see.
long are certificates good for?
If you do Let's Encrypt, it's a year, I believe.
Okay.
So anyway, you can go over here and create this and actually go and add a little monitor and pick all the different kinds and look at all these things. You can monitor MongoDB and SQL Server, Postgres directly. Yeah, it's really neat. So I'm thinking of setting this up. And if you want to play with it, just click on that little thing. You can see here, Brian, I clicked on it. Now it says I have 9 minutes and 21 seconds before my app gets blown away. But I can test it out, which is pretty cool. Anyway, it will give us potentially a really nice way to sort of monitor and get notifications about it.
So
Have that from other
potentially
services, but don't like it.
I could set it up once a day on the free one and make sure that my website at least is live for 10 minutes a day.
Yeah. Yeah, if you don't mind reconfiguring it every time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
All right. Pretty cool. How about some extras?
The only extra I got was last week. I talked about making a new pytest course. I've been working on that, and I'm on version 3 because I'm a perfectionist and want to make sure that it's smooth and quick. So I do hope to get that out sometime soon. I was going to say maybe next week, but I don't want to put too much pressure on myself.
Yeah.
When
Very
I
cool.
get it.
That's very exciting. I know people are looking forward to it. I also had to basically put DaVinci Resolve down to come record the podcast. So I was in the middle editing some videos that I got coming on for a new course as well. So very exciting stuff.
All right.
There's a never ending stream of things to talk about, right?
Yeah.
All right. I've got a couple. Kenneth writes, pointed out that, of requests and more fame. Talks about this move that Switzerland pulled. Switzerland now requires all government software to be open source.
That's
Pretty
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? You got to read it carefully. It doesn't mean the government has to only use open source, as in Linux and Firefox, but the software that the government makes has to be open source. So what this is. So if we bump over to Omnivore, you can see my notes. Switzerland has taken a major step forward with its federal law on the use of electronic means for the fulfillment of government tasks. MBAG is the acronym. This groundbreaking legislation mandates releasing open source software of the federal government. The law requires all public bodies to disclose the source code of software developed by or for them unless third-party rights or security concerns prevent it. So that's pretty neat. There was some pushback. For example, one of the main areas this was around is the justice system. This was trying to get all the software that basically runs the justice system, the court system for Switzerland, open source. But guess what? The proprietary legal software company Weblaw wasn't happy, right?
Yeah.
No, they weren't. But after a decade of fighting, it came out. And then there's one other point to make. In addition to mandating open source software, it also requires the release of non-personal, non-security sensitive data as open data. So it's like open software and open data as well. So pretty cool.
Interesting
stuff. Yeah, it is. We do have some stuff like that, like over at Talk Python. What was it? Elections, I think. If I look for that, yeah, Python at the U.S. Federal Elections Commission. I talked to Laura Beaufort, and I believe they are open sourcing their stuff as well. A lot of things going on there, like open source at the FEC, for example. So we have some stuff in like spotty examples of that, but not as a overall statement. So it's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, I'm curious to look at some of this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
how clean's your code? Like, Yeah. So, uh,
How many AWS keys will be in there? We'll find out. Thanks indirectly, Kenneth, for that. One more. Remember last week I talked about the PySimple GUI and it's switching to a commercial license, which again I'm not super against, but sort of the rug pull aspect of it, like, hey, it's open source for a long time and we're gonna take everybody's contributions and then change the license. That sort of thing got some people's nerves up. Well, F Falcon 31415 on Mastodon pointed out, hey, check out Free Simple GUI, which I linked to in the show notes, which is an actively maintained fork of the last release of PySimple GUI with an open source license. So if you were like, oh, I was going to use that, you still can.
yeah, actually, it's got a really good the README on that has some really good has some good tutorial examples of how to write a simple GUI on it. So, not
Awesome.
only is it the open source free version, but it's also some pretty good documentation on there. So,
Cool. All right.
but
How about some jokes?
yeah, joke
A
time.
singular joke. So this one is kind of a meme with Will Smith, and it doesn't really have that much to do with Will Smith. I think it's just the attitude. I like Will Smith. Anyway, it says, just because I know Java doesn't mean I know JavaScript. I mean, I do, but not because I know Java. That's good, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was just
So,
talking to whenever you talk to kids trying to learn like software, it's still confusing to people. I mean, like it's not confusing to us because we've been around it. We knew the history, but it seems weird now to tell people, yeah, the JavaScript that everybody uses, it was named that because Java was popular at the time. Uh, so anyway, um, are you muted?
I was sorry. Uh, Fun episode as always, Brian.
Yeah, fun.
And yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Now, those of you who are here on YouTube, before you take off, if you're watching this, especially if you're watching afterwards, the replay of this one, consider hitting the subscribe button if you're not. Brian, we just passed 4,000 subscribers, which for YouTube is pretty good for us, given that our main focus is podcasting, not YouTube itself. So if you want to get notified about this and other episodes and see more of it, please hit the subscribe button. And with that, we will see you all later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.